Welcome to Dear Diaspora, a podcast celebrating the African diaspora and the changemakers, innovators, and entrepreneurs working to make our world a better one to live in. I'm your host, Ndulwa Koa. Let's get started. Welcome to season 3 of the show. I am so excited to be back with brand new episodes of Dear Diaspora. If you are a new listener, thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy the content and the episodes. And be sure to follow the podcast on social media at Dear Diaspora for daily updates and inspirational content. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 50 of the show. I cannot believe we've already reached this 50 episode mark, and I am so thankful to everyone that's been able to tune in and support the show. The show launched in September of 2019, and since then, I've had the pleasure of interviewing amazing guests from all over the world. To celebrate this milestone, I'm doing a solo episode today, and I'm going to be reflecting on a few things. So first, the Biden-Harris win and what I'm hoping to see these next 4 years. Second, I'll be sharing some of the biggest takeaways from past interviews and what they've taught me about Africa, the diaspora, and what role we actually play in contributing to Africa's growth and development. And lastly, I'll end by sharing 3 big lessons I've learned this past year as a podcaster that I believe you can also apply to anything meaningful you're pursuing. And those 3 lessons are: number 1, consistency is key. Number 2, you don't need to ask for permission to follow your dreams. And number 3, there are no failures in life, only lessons to be learned. Alright, so before we get into the episode, I am so excited to share that there's now a way you can officially support the show. Dear Diaspora is now on Patreon. Patreon allows you to support your favorite content creators, and in exchange, you get exclusive content only available to you via the Patreon platform. I'll be putting out bonus episodes and video interviews on there, and you also get access to podcast merch and opportunities to become a part of the show by either becoming a guest contributor or a guest collaborator. I would love your support as I continue to grow the show, so please visit patreon.com/Dear Diaspora. That's patreon.com/Dear Diaspora, or check out the link in the show notes to learn more and become a patron today. Today's episode is brought to you by Certified Africa. If you are interested in returning to, investing in, or visiting the continent, Ghana is such a wonderful place to start. That's why I'm so happy to partner with Certified Africa, a company that specializes in unique travel experiences that connect Black travelers to movers and shakers on the African continent. This December, I'll be heading to Accra, Ghana for Certified Africa's New Year's Eve in the Motherland Beyond the Return experience, and I'd love for you to join us. There will be opportunities to network with entrepreneurs, meaningful cultural experiences, and much more. Check out the show notes for more information or visit DearDiasporaShow.com to learn more. Oh, and using discount code Dear Diaspora gets you 10% off the entire trip. Now, back to the show. Okay, so first things first, congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. This is an exciting time for so many Black women and women of color in the country. For the first time ever, we have a vice president that is a woman, and a woman of African and South Asian descent. I am so excited for Kamala and can't wait to see what she's able to do these next 4 years. I know that she'll be under intense pressure and scrutiny, just being the woman that she is and given her background as a prosecutor. But I am very optimistic, cautiously optimistic about the work that she's going to be able to do alongside Joe Biden. They have listed out a lot of their priorities, or their 4 main priorities, on their website, and so digging into those has been quite interesting. So, understandably, they are focused on COVID-19, economic recovery, racial equity, and climate change. I am really interested in seeing what they do differently as far as handling this pandemic. And one thing that stood out on their website was they are proposing this public health job corps, which essentially will be a way to get people back to work and enlist them to help fight the pandemic. So that was something that kind of stood out. And so we'll see how that goes. And what I'm looking forward to is honestly a reversal of so many of Trump's policies and executive orders that were super harmful and unfairly targeted immigrants, both undocumented and documented. I read somewhere actually that by 2021, Donald Trump would have reduced or will have reduced legal immigration by 49%. His administration was super strict and super just not open to people applying for H-1B visas. It was super harsh, as we know, on undocumented immigrants, and I really am excited to have an administration that makes decisions on immigration and other things based on actual facts and data and not fear and racism. So definitely looking forward to that. And of course, this is not over, even though, they were selected as the president-elect and the vice president-elect. There is still one more race in Georgia. So there are two runoff elections essentially for senators. And if you are in Georgia, you have the opportunity to vote in January to hopefully get Democratic senators elected. And if you're able to do that, then there will be a Democratic majority in the Senate, which will essentially make Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's jobs much easier. So be sure to request a ballot if you do live in Georgia, or if you have friends and family in Georgia, encourage them to do the same, because there are really important policies that need to be passed, and it will be a much smoother ride with a Democratic majority in the Senate. Okay, so back to Dear Diaspora and thinking through these last 50 episodes and what some of my biggest takeaways have been. And I would say the biggest thing that I've taken away is just having a better understanding of what my role is as an African in the diaspora. I think a year ago, before I got into podcasting and before I had all these conversations with innovators across the diaspora, it was easy for me to fall into that category of thinking that, because of my geography, because I'm based in the US, because of my unique educational background, that I had this amazing, great expertise that was absolutely needed on the continent. Not saying that I don't, but one thing that has changed this past year is just my level of understanding and my ability to acknowledge that I don't know everything. And I never thought I knew everything per se, but I think a lot of times when we're in the West, we look at the continent and think we know better. We look at the continent and we say, this is how things should be run. Why can't they just implement this policy? If I was back home, I would do this, this, and that. Or once I have the resources and the money, I'm going to go do this. I think we have to be very careful, and we have to realize that there's a certain privilege associated with being on the outside and being able to look in. Obviously, our perspective is going to be different, yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. And we mustn't forget that there are already existing experts who live in Africa. There are already existing entrepreneurs, change makers, people leading initiatives, governing, and we have to be able to approach anything that we do on the continent in a collaborative manner, in a way that is beneficial to not just us, but to everybody that we intend to work with or impact on the continent. I would say this past year has really just really shown me how much more learning there is to do and how much more work there is to do as well. I always refer to this episode with Andile Masugu from African Tech Roundup, and he said, you can't just hop in and out of ecosystems and expect to be able to make any significant impact. That's with regard to for-profit endeavors or non-profit endeavors. We have to have a deep understanding of the local context. We have to understand ecosystems. We have to understand who the key players are before we are able to really do anything. Essentially, we can't just hop in and say, I'm from America or I'm from England and I know better because of my educational background and you need this. That is a very dangerous approach, and even though we might be of African descent or continental Africans who have just moved abroad, I think we have to be careful not to perpetuate those same harmful systems that have been implemented by our colonizers for decades, essentially. I think it's also really important to be able to ask the right questions. Questions like, how can I amplify your already existing work? How can I best contribute to this? How can I invest in your business? Or who can I connect you to? Those questions are super important. It's really important not to say things like, you need X and Y thing built, and I'm going to lead this X project and don't really need your guidance and expertise. And I would say, from what I've observed, most people who are actually starting something meaningful on the continent are cognizant of this, and they are not approaching things that way. But I think over the last year, I really just realized how important it is to keep this in mind as we work to contribute to Africa's growth and development. What I hope to have done these past 50 episodes is highlight how innovative, intelligent, and creative we are, no matter where we're from or where we live. And it's really been such a fun experience connecting with fellow Afro optimists. I recently came across that term, and I think it accurately describes just how I view the continent. So it's been really great to connect with fellow Afro optimists and everyone that's just really interested in learning more about the continent and how they can do business or engage with the continent in a meaningful way. I'm really excited to continue to learn along with you all and dive even deeper into more Africa-focused topics. I highly recommend you check out past episodes. There have been some really great insights shared on just all things Africa, all things Diaspora. And so please check them out. And a quick note, don't forget to join the mailing list for monthly updates, exclusive announcements, plus more. I am focused on really being consistent with my newsletters, and I think they're just another really cool way to engage with Africa focused or diaspora focused content. So be sure to get on the mailing list as well. Okay, so for this last segment, I'm sharing the 3 lessons I've learned this past year as a podcaster, and I believe these lessons apply to not just podcasting, but anything meaningful that you are pursuing. And so the first one is consistency is key. You have to show up no matter what, and that's something that I've had to constantly remind myself. This year was tough on all of us, and there were times where I was just overwhelmed, y'all, with just everything happening in the world, personal issues, things, happening in my, work world. And I had to figure out why exactly I do what I do, or why I've chosen to even be a podcaster. And so there were times it was tough for me to remain consistent, but I tapped into the reason I started this podcast, which was to spotlight innovators across the diaspora and really inspire people who are looking to follow that path or just engage with the continent in a meaningful way. And so consistency is everything. You have to show up. You have to continue to do whatever activities will lead you to just being a successful person. And so being able to publish episodes every week is really important to me. And I've realized the more I put episodes out there, the more I put myself out there, the more opportunities are brought my way, and the more I just learn, and the more I'm able to share just really great content with all of you. And so consistency is it's just so important. And if there's anything meaningful that you're pursuing, you might as well go all out and put your all into everything. So that is the number one lesson for me. So the second lesson is you do not need to ask for permission to follow your dreams. And so this one is really important to me. And every day I realized how a lot of what I do, or just how I approach life, has to do with seeking validation from other people or outside sources about what I should or should not be doing. And I know I'm not the only one that struggles with this. And oftentimes we want other people to give us that okay before pursuing something. But now that I'm conscious of this and the fact that this is something that hinders my progress oftentimes, I am actively working to challenge myself every day, be more experimental, take more risks, and really take ownership of what I want. First, what I want my life to look like, and then second, what I want Dear Diaspora, this podcast, to look like. And so at the end of the day, it's really important to remember that even though feedback from other people, from customers, from listeners is important, you ultimately are the person that's going to have to implement that feedback, or to execute on, whatever plans to get you to the next milestone in your business or your project. And so keep that in mind, because other people can tell you what to do and can validate you, but then it's still on you. You are still the expert. You are still the owner of whatever it is that you're doing. And so I'm not saying that feedback is bad, but just remember and keep in mind that you don't need that external validation to let you know that what you're doing is the right thing. The last lesson, and probably the most important lesson, is that there are no failures in life, only lessons to be learned. And I could probably do an entire episode on this, but especially this year, I think it's important to remember that no matter, what losses you experienced or, what L's you took, those experiences don't define who you are as a person. And all they do is really teach you how to move differently moving forward. This year, I found out a lot of things about myself through the experiences that I went through. And if you would have told me my life would look the way it looks like right now a year ago, I probably would have laughed or chuckled, because I would have thought you were being just so extra or ridiculous. And so this past year, a lot has changed for me. So the biggest change for me was my quote unquote dream job. It not turning out to be what I expected, like at all. And what that taught me, honestly, was not to put people on a pedestal. I have a tendency to do that, and I'm slowly unlearning that. And really, I have to remind myself all the time that everyone is human and that we're all flawed, and that ultimately most people will disappoint you in some sort of way. So putting them on this super high pedestal really is never the best approach, because ultimately you'll most likely get disappointed, but you can save yourself a lot of hurt and disappointment by realizing and acknowledging that people are just people. And so, needless to say, I had to switch jobs early this year, and that really was a moment for me that felt a little overwhelming. And I felt like, oh my gosh, like, this was supposed to be my dream job. What am I supposed to do now? So anyway, my dream job wasn't what I expected. I left that job in June. I was previously based in Kansas City, and I left there after living there for about 10 months, and I'm now based in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm closer to family. So all these shifts were made in the middle of a pandemic, and if I was given the option to do it again, I honestly would, just for my own well-being and financial security. So luckily, that same week I left my job, I was able to secure a contract with a former employer, and I've been doing that work ever since, and I'm working as an independent contractor, and it's been a big adjustment for me, but I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot about what it takes for me to actually succeed when I'm pursuing something. I know more about my work style. I now know that I'm not a morning person for sure. I've been able to challenge myself in different ways than I ever thought I would be. And so even though what I experienced this past year, like in my professional life, was not ideal, I learned so much from those experiences, and I do not view those experiences as failures at all, because I would not be where I am now if it weren't for those experiences. And so I really hope that helps. If you have gone through anything like most of us have this past year, just know that you are not a failure. Sometimes things happen, and you really don't have much control over them. And it's really about how you bounce back and how you embrace your setbacks. So with that said, I would like to thank you all for tuning in to episode 50. I hope that you enjoyed this content. I really am the type of person that loves to just reflect on everything and just take a moment to pause and really celebrate milestones, no matter how small they are. And so 50 episodes, I cannot wait to get to the next 50 episodes and reach that 100 episode mark. I again thank you all for tuning in every week and for spreading the word about the podcast. If you took anything away from this episode, I encourage you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and share this with one friend you think would enjoy this. Today's episode is brought to you by Certified Africa. If you are interested in returning to, investing in, or visiting the continent, Ghana is such a wonderful place to start. That's why I'm so happy to partner with Certified Africa, a company that specializes in unique travel experiences that connect Black travelers to movers and shakers on the African continent. This December, I'll be heading to Accra, Ghana for Certified Africa's New Year's Eve in the Motherland Beyond the Return experience, and I'd love for you to join us. There will be opportunities to network with entrepreneurs, meaningful cultural experiences, and much more. Check out the show notes for more information or visit deardiasporashow.com to learn more. Oh, and using discount code Dear Diaspora gets you 10% off the entire trip. Thanks for listening to Dear Diaspora. If you like what you hear, please rate the show and leave us a review. If you really like what you hear, become an official supporter of the show by visiting patreon.com/Dear Diaspora. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.